Hi, I'm Jacob Murad, president of KPA Lawyers, and today we're going to talk a little bit about probate. What is it and why do I need it? Or do I need it in the first place? Probate is basically a fancy word for a process that you have to go through when someone passes away. It is a court process. Remember, I'm talking about in Ontario, every province and certain countries have their own process, how to manage assets and distribute assets after someone passes away. So depending on the types of assets that you have or that the deceased has when they pass away, determines whether or not and to what extent you need to go through this probate process. Because unfortunately, the probate process is like any other bureaucratic process. It takes a lot of time, it costs money, you need a lawyer, and it's a pain. But what is it? Why do you need it? So after you go through this process, application forms are filled out. The executor or estate trustee is usually the person in charge of hiring a lawyer to go through this process on behalf of the person who passed away, the deceased. After they go through this process and they wait a period of time and they pay certain fees, the court, a judge or so forth at the court's office will stamp a piece of paper, a certificate that proves that the person who is in charge of dealing with the deceased assets is allowed to do it. It has a lot of power and a lot of weight. So now that person can walk into a bank with this certificate and say, give me access to the deceased's accounts so I can start paying for funeral expenses. I can start sending the money that's in this person's account to the beneficiaries or the people in the will, and so forth. So without this piece of paper, without going through that probate process, if someone, a next of kin, walked into a bank to try to get access to the accounts, if you didn't have access already, then unfortunately, they'll just say, no, not without the proper probate certificate. And this is the case if you wanted to list a condo or a house for sale. A lot of times, the real estate agent will say to you, I need proof that you're the person I should be dealing with and not someone else. That proof, again, comes in the form of a stamped probate certificate, something from the court that proves you're the person to speak to. Okay. So that's why it's so important to go through probate and to go through that process. Now, when do you not need to go through that process? Again, it depends on the types of assets that you're dealing with. If, for example, the deceased had life insurance and the life insurance named a beneficiary, someone who gets the money when the deceased passes away, most of the time, the person who is entitled to that money can call up the insurance company and can note that, hey, on the policy, I'm entitled to it. And most of the time, the insurance company will say, okay, no problem. They just need proof of death, proof of policy, and so forth. But they don't need you to go through that process. Similarly, if you are on title of a piece of property and you are jointly on title with someone and that person passes away, then automatically you will inherit by right of survivorship that person's piece of property. You don't have to go through the probate process, but you may have to go through a different process to get their name off of the house, and now your name is solely on the house. So these are the types of assets that you don't have to necessarily go through probate. You don't have to pay probate taxes. You don't have to pay legal fees or court fees. You can just move ahead. A corporation is another one of these examples where if the directors and officers, and if there's a shareholders agreement, if they trust that the person that they're dealing with is the right person to deal with, then they may not need this type of probate process either. So in order to manage your affairs such that you don't have to go through this process, you may have to no matter what, but you can manage your affairs so that you don't have to go through this process and you can speak to an estate's lawyer to help you through it. Some strategies include putting a trusted person who's going to manage your affairs after death, put that person directly on your bank account, make them an authorized individual. then they have the right to go to the bank and they don't need to provide a certificate. Make sure that your insurance is in order. You can deal with your property title in the same way. And in another video, we'll talk a little bit more about uh, the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common and how to get people on so that you don't have to go through probate. Sometimes no matter what, you may still have to go through probate, but there are strategies that can minimize having to go through it and minimize the time and costs. So it's very important that you speak to a lawyer about this.